Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle. Above me on the screen, as always, Joe Clark. Sorry we were gone for a week. I was in the Bahamas, completely off the map. I did not even really have cell service or coverage of any kind, and so a lot of Steelers news took place. And so this show, we're actually probably going to be getting me caught up more than anything. Joe's going to be getting me learned up on everything that has happened. But we'll talk about Aaron Rodgers re-signing officially with the Steelers and what that means for the quarterback room, some of the other quarterback room news that's come out of OTAs so far. The Steelers have had their first 3 OTA sessions. 2 of those open to the media, 1 was closed. So we'll talk about some of the news that came from that, which will segue us into the offensive line configuration so far. Who's lined up where? That's going to be one of the biggest topics between now and the start of the regular season. It's probably going to change several times by the looks of it. It already has changed a couple times, and we'll get into that in this show. Before talking about the schedule release, that feels like Joe just told me before this show started, the schedule release was a week ago, and it feels like it was a month ago. And I kind of feel like I missed about a month of news. It was a very busy week, the way that my vacation aligned, so I apologize to my team members here at Steelers Depot, but they handled it well. I'm sure a lot of you are more caught up than I am. With all that said, Joe, how are you doing? You're going on a little vacation this weekend, I believe, so you looking forward to that?
Yeah, doing well. Going to spend tonight, tomorrow night in Cape Cod, come back on Sunday, and I'm taking my mom to Bruce Springsteen for her birthday, so that'll be a fun little Memorial Day weekend.
Nice. Has she ever seen Bruce Springsteen before?
Yeah, she's seen him, I don't know, probably 15-ish
Oh,
times.
wow.
I've probably seen him 6 or 7 times,
Oh,
so
wow. Okay. Well, that'll be fun. NBA Finals, anything? Do you have
the
a
Western Conference Finals have been pretty fun to watch between the Spurs and Thunder. The East, the Cavs look like dead men walking against the Knicks. James Harden can't cover Jalen Brunson, so I'm anticipating a Spurs Knicks Finals, and I pray to God that the Spurs just beat the crap out of them because I do not like the Knicks.
I think we're on. I don't care about basketball at all, but I do care about Stephen A. Smith getting angry, and so I'm also rooting for the Knicks to lose at some point. That's his team, right? I'm not making that up.
I think so.
Yeah, I think. Anyhow, we'll get into the football stuff now. Aaron Rodgers re-signed with the Steelers on a 1-year, $22.5 million. Or sorry, it could be up to $25 million. The cap number is $22.5, which is up from last year. I think the base salary that he had last year was what, $13.5 or something like that, with incentives to reach higher. So
Yes.
he did get a raise, which there was a lot of talk about whether or not it was contract related. You saw the Charlie Batches of the world throwing out a 30 million number. It didn't quite reach that, but he did get a raise, and I think a lot of people were somehow upset by the fact that he got a raise, even though he was playing like severely, ridiculously under market value. He's still under market value. What, Matthew Stafford just signed a 55 million 1-year deal. Obviously, Rodgers isn't as good as Stafford at this point in time, but he's probably not divisible by 2 or whatever worse than Stafford. So, Joe, what was your? I mean, we've beat this topic to death, and so by the time the news happens, it's really not that exciting to talk about. But were there any
Yeah,
surprises?
honestly, not really at all. It was funny because me and Josh Carney were talking on Friday night, planning out just our weekend strategy for last weekend. I'm like, like we were both like, Rogers is definitely going to sign this weekend. There's a lot of like weird reports coming out on Friday about how like the team's going to get upset if he doesn't come Monday. Monday's like when they're going to reach their breaking point. I'm like, there's no way he's not going to sign this weekend. And then the guy posted the video from that Cool Cones on Friday night, and it was at that point it was only a matter of time. Um, Salary didn't surprise me at all because Tom Pelissero had reported earlier last week that the number would have a 2 in front of it. So it's a $22 million base with two $250,000 roster bonuses. One's paid out August 7th, one's paid out week 1. Both of those are going to get paid out. And then all the incentives, it's 625,000 per playoff win. All those not likely to be earned, which is why they don't count against the cap for this year. But yeah, no surprise really. I mean, I think Jerry Dulac reported the contract just hammered out a month ago. It was just a matter of Rodgers wanted his time to relax. He's not a big offseason guy, but he gets in the building for day one of OTAs, gets to build chemistry with the Michael Pittman, Jeremy Bernards of the world. Um, and he's there for Will Howard and Drew Aller to kind of just continue to be a mentor, but pretty standard business. I don't have any issue with the contract. It's what we've expected all along. So no surprises really at all. The timing of the deal, the value, pretty straightforward in terms of that.
I think the most interesting conversation about the quarterback room now is who's the odd man out. I think there's a case to be made for. I mean, I think. Do we both agree Drew Aller's not getting cut?
No, there's no chance Schroeder's getting cut.
You don't spend a 76th overall pick on a guy. If he was like a late fourth rounder or something, maybe that'd be more of a conversation. But you're not cutting a guy who you just selected at number 76 overall. So that narrows it down to Howard or Rudolph. Do we both agree that they're okay, maybe we don't both agree on this. Are they going to keep a fourth quarterback?
I don't think so. I think there's almost no chance to keep a fourth quarterback.
Yeah, I saw Mike McCarthy making comments. What did he say? He said something. I wish that, or I told Omar to, make sure that we can have a 55-man roster or something like that. To me, that is an indication of, hey, we're not able to keep four quarterbacks we wish we could. And so, all right, agreeing that they're probably not going to keep four quarterbacks, that makes Will Howard or Mason Rudolph the odd man out. I would have a hard time believing Will Howard would be cut after they spent so long hyping him up. But are the Steelers really going to roll into a season with zero experience behind Aaron Rodgers? Joe, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm in the same boat as you, and I wrote on Sunday that I think Rudolph would probably be the odd man out. And since Rodgers has been signed, there's been a sentiment in the local media. It's been a little bit split, but the larger sentiment has kind of seen that Mason Rudolph, they want to have a veteran backup. They're a win now team. Keep him as the number two. But they were a win now team back in 2018 when they cut Landry Jones and kept Josh Dobbs and Mason Rudolph. So there's precedent for the Steelers rolling into a season with inexperienced backups. I mean, Kevin Colbert was the GM then, sure, yes, but Omar Khan was still part of the front office. So he saw what happened there. I mean, I don't think that was necessarily a bad decision. And then in 2019, you had Mason Rudolph able to step in. Maybe the experience in 2018 maybe helped him a little bit. Who knows? So I think it's more likely than not they keep Howard. I mean, I don't know why you spend all this time praising the guy just to then let him go. I mean, it's a risk if you put him on waivers. I know. I think it was Mark Cabali speculated that they could cut Howard, and then he's not obligated to sign to any team's practice squad. He could do like a wink, wink, nod, handshake deal and sign back to Pittsburgh's practice squad. But if you look around the league, I could see a team taking a flyer on Will Howard. I mean, especially with all the positive publicity that the Steelers have been spewing about him. I mean, is it a smokescreen? Yeah, maybe, but they've talked so highly of the kid. It just seems very unlikely they get rid of him. And I mean, I think Jerry Dulac praised him, how he's looked at OTAs this week. There's a report from Jason Lockett 4 earlier this week that said, they felt at the end of last season he was getting game ready. So I feel like Mason Rudolph is probably the odd man out. And again, there's no rush to figure this out because they'll take four quarterbacks in a training camp. And that honestly, I think gives them leverage when it comes to Rudolph because who knows what's going to happen. A team might not be comfortable with their backup quarterback and somebody might get hurt. And then all of a sudden Mason Rudolph's a veteran. Hey, flip him for a 6th-round pick, conditional 5th, conditional 6th, something like that. He has that sort of trade value then there too. So I feel like one way or another, Mason Rudolph's going to be the quarterback who finds his way off this roster. I mean, it's early to say, but I just have a hard time believing that. Yeah, I know like the two guys don't have any experience behind them, but I have a hard time believing that they're pouring this much into Howard just to let him go at the end of his second season.
Yeah, and a lot can happen between now and then. Will Howard had the broken pinky or whatever last year, whatever it was, something in his hand. That could happen again with any of the four quarterbacks, and then your decision's kind of made for you. And it's not unheard of to kind of stash players on IR if they have maybe a very, very minor injury and you want to send like a Drew Aller to IR so that you can have Rudolph for the first however many games to make sure that, if Rodgers gets hurt in like week 1, you're not just rolling with Will Howard for, however long, maybe the whole season. So a lot could happen. I tend to think, Rudolph is the odd man out as well. I mean, is it unthinkable to think that Rudolph could be stashed on the practice squad? I mean, is anyone going to poach him? He does have experience. He's a decent backup, but I don't know. I feel like the Steelers value him more than anybody because look what happened when he went to Tennessee. It didn't work out. He didn't do very well. He got, I think, was he cut or was that a 1-year deal over there? I think he was cut. I can't quite remember.
I can't remember.
Anyway, he circled back to Pittsburgh on, a nothing deal basically. And so I have a hard time really seeing another team pouncing on a Rudolph. I don't know. Could you stash him on the practice squad?
I think there's certainly a possibility. I mean, if they cut him and a team isn't going to give him a number two job, why would he not go on the practice squad knowing that, if something happens to Rodgers, he could very well still be the next man up if he's on the practice squad in Pittsburgh. And he has familiarity, he has comfort here. So I think it's not completely out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and I just don't know how hot the backup quarterback trade market is. And of course, things can change if injuries happen throughout training camp and stuff. But how long has every ESPN pundit been trying to trade Tanner McKee to the Steelers?
So, for like a second round pick, a third round pick, and Nick Herbig.
Right. So, yeah, I feel like if McKee's not getting traded or whatever, I don't really see Rudolph being a hot commodity on that market either. So I don't know. We'll have plenty of time to continue to talk about this. It sounds like Rudolph's not really getting as many reps, which is to be expected. They kind of already know what they have in him. He even said he kind of expected to not get the reps because they wanted to see what they have in Howard and Aller, and that all makes sense. Interestingly, you have kind of contrasting, like opposite reports on Howard and Aller so far. Howard, you have both of Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's top beat writers, that's Ray Fittipaldo and Jerry Dulac, both saying that he looks sharp, praising his footwork, and, basically everything so far has just said Howard looks sharp. On the contrary, you have The Athletic's Mike DeFabo today on 93.7 The Fan saying that Aller has not looked that good. Inaccurate passes, sloppy footwork, all this kind of stuff that you'd expect. I mean, we all knew that he was a project, but it does kind of put an extra emphasis on, okay, well, Howard seems to be looking good. They're not going to cut Aller, and so what does that mean for Rudolph? And so you probably, we both kind of agree Rudolph's most likely the odd man out. Anything else on the Aller front, mechanics, anything like that happened that I missed throughout OTAs?
There's the report, I want to say end of last week, maybe. It's all a blur, but I think that the Steelers are basically having him forget everything he learned at Penn State and reworking his mechanics, which got a lot more publicity than it probably should have. I feel like that's a very common thing when a young quarterback comes in the NFL, especially when you have somebody who's renowned for working with quarterbacks like Mike McCarthy. You fix the problems, and the problems with Aller were his mechanics. So you want him to unlearn the bad and learn the good. I mean, I think the way the report was maybe worded kind of was jarring to some people, but I think the Steelers are doing what they should be with Aller. I don't think he's ready to start. There's a reason he was a third round pick. He's also coming off an injury at Penn State, so he didn't get a ton of game reps last season because he got hurt midway through the season. So it's going to be sloppy to start. There's going to be a lot of work to develop him and take advantage of his tools and traits that are NFL ready, but there's a lot that they have to work on with him. So I think it's good that they're kind of rewiring everything and trying to get him to that point where maybe one day he could start.
To me, the biggest kind of overlooked news of the Aller looking not so good, Howard looking sharp, is the fact that they're both kind of going through the same Mike McCarthy back to the basics fundamentals stuff. And yeah, we saw maybe out of context Aller videos where his footwork was like super slow and everybody's like, oh my God, he looks terrible. But that's how it's supposed to look as they're kind of going back to the basics with the fundamentals. And so to me, Aller not looking good isn't a surprise. I think he even said, either Mike McCarthy said or Aller said that Mike McCarthy told him to not really worry about the results on a play-in, play-out basis. The results will come as the fundamentals improve. And so Aller not looking good is fine. There's no reason to sound the alarm on that, though I'm sure people will. To me, the bigger story is Howard isn't having those same struggles. He's looking sharp already this early on. And, he only had voluntary minicamp thing with McCarthy, and otherwise just these few OTA sessions, and he's already looking good, and that's a really good sign for him. I guess he had the benefit of working with Mike McCarthy's top protege for a year, and so maybe he picked up some of this stuff along the way from Aaron Rodgers himself. But either way, I think it's a positive thing for Howard. All right, we're going to move into the offensive line conversation here. And Joe, I need you to get me caught up on this because rookie minicamp happened. It was one way, and now I feel like everything's changed, and I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, so the Steelers rolled out first day of OTAs. Their starting offensive line was from left to right: Troy Fautano, Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier, Spencer Anderson, and Dylan Cook. So it was interesting there. There's been a lot of talk about moving Fautano over to the left side, but McCormick flipping from the right to the left, keeping the continuity of having McCormick next to Fautano. And for Fautano set up for the first day, he's like, there's no one else that I'd rather play next to them, McCormick. Both of them played on the left side in college, so it's going back to their college position. It's not, a total flip of the sides. Spencer Anderson has some experience at right guard in the NFL too, so it's not as if that's completely foreign to him. So that was a little bit interesting to me that they're keeping McCormick on the left side. Max Ahanichor in rookie minicamp played right tackle. Jennings Dunker played left guard. I would presume that Jennings Dunker will be in the mix to start at right guard with Brock Hoffman and Spencer Anderson. It might not happen week one, but I figured that would be the competition on the right side, even though I think Dunker said he played left guard at minicamp. Brian Angelico did say this week they're going to teach Ahanichor basically every position. They're going to move him around and try to get him comfortable wherever they can. But I think right tackle, which is where he almost exclusively played at college, makes the most sense. The big unknown in this whole thing is Broderick Jones. He's been around, but he said he really has no timeline for his return. Reportedly, he's lost a lot of weight. Who knows if he's going to be ready? It really doesn't sound like he's going to be ready for week one. He said he's been doing a little bit of individual drills, hasn't done anything in team. So Broderick becomes the big unknown, but I think the odds of him probably starting the season on PUP or IR are much, much higher than him being active week one. And you can't read too much into OTAs, but I do think reading into this offensive line, this very well could be your week one starting offensive line. I mean, it depends how Dunker progresses, how Hunter progresses, but Dylan Cook looked good at the end of last year. I think there's a very real chance he does start at right tackle week one, and Fautano starts at left tackle. I think Fautano is probably going to be your left tackle going forward. McCormick was kind of the big curveball there, but it makes a lot of sense, and I think that's a smart move just to try to kind of keep that continuity. Communication, the guy you're playing next to matters a lot on the offensive line, and clearly Fautano and McCormick are very comfortable playing next to each other. So I do like that move. It seems like a smart swap by Mike McCarthy, James Camp, and whoever made that decision. So definitely an interesting start in terms of where they're at on the offensive line right now. It's February when the season ended. I don't think we thought we'd be talking this much about the offensive line at this early, because it seemed pretty well established. But that Broderick injury kind of threw a wrench into everything. But I like the direction that things are headed, honestly.
I feel like this is exposure therapy for gun-shy Pittsburgh Steelers fans. How much has really, like, since the Dotson, I guess, debacle of left guard, right guard, and him going and becoming a great when he flipped sides over there with the Rams, and then you have the Broderick Jones playing him out of position, swapping him sides. It kind of sets his development back, or at least that's the narrative that people run with. I mean, he played a little bit better on the left, but it's not like he was all of a sudden great. But I feel like Steelers fans in general have just had this weird thing about, offensive linemen can't be moved positions. That's a no-no. And then, of course, the new coaching staff comes in, and they seem all about this versatility thing, moving them around, seeing where they're the most comfortable. And maybe it will settle at a more familiar spot down the line here. But right now, you would only have Zach Frazier as the only lineman in his position where he was last year as of the current alignment. So it's Steelers fans are about to find out if this whole side thing that they've been so worried about actually matters. Maybe it will in some of the cases, maybe it won't in some of the other cases. But the Steelers have invested way too much in this offensive line to not get it right. And so I the only reason I'm not super worried about the flipping of sides right now is just because James Campen is very experienced. He's definitely seen guys try or successfully even flip sides, and if he didn't think it was a good idea, they wouldn't be messing with this so much this early. So I get people's fears with the position changes, but I think it'll all work out with this offensive line. There's too much talent for it not to. The interesting thing to me right now is Anderson and Cook on the right side. Is that just going to end up being Dunker and Ihanacho by week 1? Is that going to be by week? I mean, let's go one by one. Dunker, actually, which of those two will become the permanent starter first?
I'm actually going to go with Ihanacho. Just because Dunker, it is a transition for him to move to guard, even though it's easier to play guard than tackle. He still has to transition. There's still things he has to learn. And you have Spencer Anderson and you have Brock Hoffman. Whereas it seems like Ihanacho, if you're going to play right tackle, it seems like his main competition really would just be Dylan Cook. I think it really just depends how much he progresses. I mean, we saw Cook hold his own last year. It wouldn't surprise me if he did it again, but you spent a first round pick on Ihanacho, you probably want to get him in the lineup sooner rather than later. I would think he's probably more likely to start, even though, yeah, I don't know. It's tough, but I think Ihanacho probably has the upper hand when it comes to starting first.
Yeah, to me, you don't do this alignment that they currently have, and again, maybe it will all change, but you don't do this current alignment where you flip in Fautanu and McCormick unless you're making way for Dunker and Ihanacho. I think that Ihanacho could be the week 1 starter at this point. Cook, yes, he did well at left tackle, but now you're flipping him sides. Ihanacho is very used to right tackle. They seem to think he's pretty ready despite kind of the narrative that he's raw or whatever. I don't know if I necessarily agree that he's week 1 ready, but I just kind of see them wanting to get to their final starting offensive line as soon as possible so that those guys can gel. I mean, this is a win-now season after all. You don't bring Aaron Rodgers back unless it is a let's compete and win right now. If they were just kind of trying to build for the future and taking their time and stuff, they would have not brought Rodgers back. And so that you have to kind of run all of your predictions through that filter of what's best for right now. Anything else with the offensive line here? I don't think so. That covered it pretty good. I think I'm caught up, which is good because I was pretty confused seeing Dunker and stuff at left guard and Ihanacho right tackle, and then getting Fautanu. I think Fautanu over to the left was expected, but McCormick to left guard, not so expected to me. Although I guess it makes sense to want those guys' chemistry to carry forward. We're going to move into the schedule portion of the show. And once again, I have looked at the schedule a little bit, but haven't really gone through the nitty-gritty of it all. They're opening up against the Falcons or during a kind of midday slot or an early slot on Sunday. How many total primetime? 4, I think.
4 primetime games and 6 standalone games.
That's pretty good.
Because you have the France game and the Black Friday game, which aren't technically in primetime, but they have their own broadcast window.
All right, and I actually just saw that the NFL is no longer going to allow teams to protect their international games. So I actually had kind of been kicking around an idea to write about that the Steelers probably won't play as many international games as other teams until it becomes a every team every year kind of rule in the NFL, because teams like to protect their Steelers games because Steelers fans travel well and sell out stadiums. And that's exactly why the Jaguars protected the game and why the Steelers probably weren't scheduled in London this year, because it kind of seemed like it was going towards that. I think Jerry Dulac even mentioned that the Jaguars in London was a possibility up until the Jaguars protected that game. And now the NFL is stripping that away, and so you can expect the Steelers, especially after their success in Ireland, launching that market. And, well, look what they're doing this year. They're launching another market. They're going to launch Paris for the NFL with the Saints if that's a success, you can bet the Steelers are going to be every year international team, and the league's trending that way. And honestly, for the Steelers, it might have already started. The Steelers may not have another season without an international game for quite some time. Because I think Mexico City is on the very near future, kind of upcoming teams. Where else? The Steelers have, I think Germany is one of their global markets that was added. So you're probably going to see a Munich or Berlin or wherever they're playing those game for the Steelers in the next few years as well. And I mean, this just might be the start of it for the Steelers every year international.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mind the international games, especially where they're at 9:30. I wouldn't be happy if the Steelers are playing in Melbourne like the 49ers and I think the Seahawks are. And 49ers, whoever the 49ers are playing in Melbourne, I don't remember. Whoever they're playing in Melbourne. I wouldn't be happy about that necessarily because that's like a 8:30 p.m. I think kickoff. 9:30 a.m. kickoff, I'm cool with. Give me those international games. That's fine. But yeah, I don't love the not being able to protect games. Like, are we gonna get to a point where we have Steelers Ravens in Germany like that?
Oh
I
yeah,
feel like
it's coming.
like it's coming, and I just feel like that sucks because it takes away a little bit of the aspect of the rivalry and the hostile crowd, and you're just going somewhere. So that's that. I don't love that aspect of the international stuff, but it is what it is. It was only a matter of time as the NFL tries to go more global.
Yeah, and they are already teasing markets like Japan and UAE, and I mean, some of these places are very far trips, so you're getting into the territory of the jet lag. I mean, Steelers going to Ireland. There was a lot of talk about how things played out for them in London back in what year was that? 2012, 2013, something like that, against the Viking. Was it? Yeah, the Vikings. They got beat, and there was players sleeping in meetings. I think coaches were even sleeping in the meetings. There was a lot said about the jet lag. Honestly, jet lag to England is not that bad. I don't know what they're talking about. I lived in London when I was younger and made the trip back and forth all the time. It's really not that bad. Now, I'm not a professional athlete that's working out and, taking a huge toll on my body. Maybe that adds to it, but not that bad. But if you're talking about UAE, you're talking about what I think is Paris just one more time zone past that? I don't even know.
I believe so.
Okay, so from the Steelers, instead of I think 3 hours, it's 4 hours different. I mean, that's not that crazy. That's like a West Coast trip, honestly, and really not that bad. The flight is like the same length as if you're flying to L.A. or something. It's not anything crazy, but yeah, the first time the Steelers end up with Australia or Japan, I mean, honestly, I might try and go because that sounds awesome, but. There's going to be a lot of talking points about the coaches and stuff falling asleep back in 2012 for sure. Anything else about the schedule here? What is, I guess, the most difficult stretch of the schedule?
Oh, week 10 to 15 is brutal. I mean, I think the Steelers really have to get off to a hot start in weeks 1 through 8. Week 10, Sunday Night Football against the Bengals. Then you have the Eagles in the House of Horrors for the Steelers. It's become Lincoln Financial Field at 4:25 on a Sunday. All I can think about is that game 2 years ago when the Eagles just dominated time of possession, and that game, that was an awful game.
Was that one in
Then you
Philly?
go, I believe that was in Philly.
Why? Why? What? Isn't it supposed to? How is this happening?
I don't
Is
know.
isn't it supposed to alternate?
Am I wrong about that? I mean, now let me look because now I might be wrong about that. But I'm pretty sure that game was at the link. Yeah, that game was at the link. I have no,
I feel like
I don't
every
know how
time
it's
they
supposed
play
to
the
ultimately
Eagles,
work.
it's at the link. What's going on with that?
I know, it's crazy. Um, and then Broncos on a short week on Black Friday. At least you're at home. Then Texans on Sunday Night Football. Then Jaguars on Monday Night Football on the road. And then you return home to play the Ravens for the first time of the season. Like that is a brutal 6 game stretch. So if you don't start off strong in week, is realistically, I mean, what that's 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 6 games. You're probably looking at like 2 and 4. I can't. If you go 3 and 3, that's a fantastic stretch. So you start your first 8 games are very manageable. You only play one playoff team in the page from last year in the Patriots. It's an early season Patriots game. There's a lot of turmoil around that team right now. I think that could play in their favor a little bit. Bengals is a tough game. The Steelers against the Browns on Thursday Night Football. I mean, on the road against the Browns, they've struggled on the road against the Browns on Thursday Night Football, but it's week 4. I would like to think they're going to be pretty still pretty fresh, and they should take care of that. Your most difficult games are probably Patriots week 2, Bengals week 3, Bucks week 6 on the road. So 5-3 is the absolute worst I think you can go in those first 8 games. I would realistically think you probably have to get to 6-2, and I think they very well could get to 6-2. The only good thing about that, week 10 to 15 stretches, it's coming off the week 9 bye. The Steelers don't have their bye coming off the Paris game. They're playing the Browns the next week at home, 1 p.m., and then they take their bye, which is originally, I'm like, that's kind of weird not taking their bye after the Paris game, but I like that they have their bye before this stretch. That's just it's tough. It's tough. I mean, maybe the Jaguars will regress. The Eagles very well could regress. AJ Brown's on his way out of town. But that's still a brutal stretch. At least then after that you get the Panthers and the Titans, 2 games that realistically they should win before you close things against the Ravens. I think, and I wrote this in my, 3 make or break games. I think the season could very well come down to week 18 against the Ravens again, as it has seemingly the last like 10 years, but really the last year, and I think not the year before, but maybe the year before that, where they had to beat the Ravens again in the playoffs. Um, but yeah, I mean that stretch is brutal, but yeah, getting off to a hot start will be key.
The way I see it, the Steelers have 2 straight byes after that international game at home against the Browns, so the NFL did them a solid there for sure. But yeah, interesting that the bye is actually not the week after. I guess I thought that was supposed to be like a rule or something, but I guess not. What is it? 9:30. So okay, so it's Sunday to Sunday. Did the Browns also have an international game in week 7 or something like that, or probably not?
They they have won at some point. I know last year they didn't take their bye after the international game, and they played the Steelers, and that was not sloppy, mucky field disaster of a game. It was after their London trip, I believe, last year. So I know there's at least precedent for the team not taking the bye after their international game.
All right. Well, we're not going to do any predictions or anything like that now. We'll save those for much later in the off season. But I think overall the Steelers, the schedule's fine. It's nothing. I mean, the Steelers have had these kind of brutal stretches after kind of trade deadline the last 2 or 3 years, so it doesn't really feel that different. Honestly, the very end of the schedule, Panthers, Titans, and then Ravens again. But Panthers, Titans, that's a pretty relaxed December or whatever, if you ask me. So it could be much worse. And I think if you look at the previous year strength of schedule, win total stuff, the Steelers are one of the top 10 easiest schedules, I think. So obviously that stuff ultimately doesn't usually end up meaning all that much because the league changes so much from year to year. But on paper right now, just from glancing over the schedule, it's not a death row by any means to my just first gut reaction. But all right, we're going to move into our listener question. And if you want to have a question answered on a future episode, 412-254-3145, you can call and leave a voicemail, or you can text that number. Just tell us your name, where you're from, and leave a brief question for us to hash out at the end of a future episode. And this one, I believe we have a new caller. This is Molly from Oregon.
Hey, this is Molly from Oregon, and I'm just wondering if all the positive hype around Eli Heidenreich means that I should get excited for him to make the team, and who on our current 53-man roster would you all give up to get Eli on the team? I think he should be there, but as a 7th-round draft pick, I know his chances might be slim. I'd say I'd give up Caleb Johnson. I'd probably give up Roman Wilson, maybe only carry 8 offensive linemen. What do you guys think?
All right, Molly, thank you for calling in. We appreciate having first-time callers. This one about Eli Heidenreich and the 53-man roster conundrum of how do you fit all these draft picks onto the roster. My initial 53 prediction, I had Heidenreich making it. I had Rubio as the only draft pick not making it, and I think, Omar Khan's history has kind of suggested that he keeps his draft picks. It's going to be kind of testing that theory this year because there are 10 of them. But I think it's definitely realistic that Heidenreich could make the roster. It is going to be tough just because, the Roman Wilson, it seems like the early returns right now on him are decent. Caleb Johnson, maybe, what? Was he taking some first? Did I see he was taking some, it's OTAs, but was he taking some starting reps the other day?
Yeah, there was some speculation that Warren and Dowdle weren't there. There's nothing that was officially reported in terms of that, but yeah, there's the one video clip that did have Caleb Johnson with the first team, but I don't know if that's necessarily worth reading into.
Yeah. Okay. So it was because the other two weren't there. Actually, Mike DeFabo on the Fan this morning, I believe, said Dowdle was not there. So that at least confirms one of them, and sounds like maybe Warren, maybe not either. So, okay. I still think Caleb Johnson could be in trouble a little bit. I had him off of my 53-man roster prediction, and that's kind of one of the guys that you have to circle when it comes to Heidenreich's chances, just because you're either fitting him in as a receiver or a running back. Is Travis Homer going to make it? I tend to think yes, just because of the special teams value. They need an up back, but they could maybe find an up back elsewhere on the roster, like if Robert Spears-Jennings can do that, or even if Eli Heidenreich can do something like that. It's just hard to know. You can kind of just go off of what they did in college and or what they've done so far in the NFL. And configuring the special teams might look a lot different this year anyways, because the Steelers have a new coaching staff and a different guy. It's not Danny Smith anymore calling the shots back there. So it's going to look a little bit different. I think one thing I'm confident in is his path has to come through special teams, so he has to prove his value on probably 2 or 3 units on special teams. Maybe he can be the other return specialist, so you don't have to get Jalen Warren involved in kick return. You can have Caden Weegan and Eli Heidenreich doing the kick returns. It's also possible he makes the roster, but he's a game day inactive for a little bit. That's another possibility for him. But Joe, your thoughts on Heidenreich?
Yeah, the way I've broken this down a few different ways. There's one path where he proves he has more special teams rather than Travis Homer. That's, I think, incredibly unlikely because Travis Homer has been a special teams guy in the league for the past few years. I think, and Danny Crossman had a lot of good things to say about him. I think he proves he's going to be a more valuable offensive weapon than Caleb Johnson. That's an easy way for him to make the roster, and I think he can check more special teams boxes than Johnson. Roman Wilson, him and Aaron Rodgers were never on the same page last season. If that continues, I could see him not making the roster. I think there's that report that kind of got glossed over earlier this offseason from Mark Cabali. It's like the one guy who wouldn't be happy if Aaron Rodgers returned would be Roman Wilson. So that's a little bit of an interesting thing to note. There could be a chance there. The other path is that the Steelers keep 8 offensive linemen. It's something Mike McCarthy did early on in his tenure with Dallas. You keep 8 offensive linemen, you open up a spot elsewhere, and then you have Heidenreich as kind of your hybrid running back receiver. In that case, I do think either him, Caleb Johnson, or Roman Wilson would be the game day inactive early on in the season. But I think that is probably the easiest path for Heidenreich to make the rosters if the Steelers only opt to keep 8 offensive linemen and then save that spot for Heidenreich. But otherwise, yeah, I think Caleb Johnson and Roman Wilson, you kind of nailed it, are the two guys that would be in risk for if you were going to keep Heidenreich.
Molly also mentioned keeping 8 offensive linemen, which I think you wrote about a little bit, and I think Dave and Alex talked about on the podcast. If there are only 8 offensive linemen, that could open up a spot to keep somebody like a Heidenreich. So those are all possibilities. It's hard to predict right now, but I am currently leaning towards Heidenreich does make the roster. I like the idea that Navy guys can't really fully focus on football, and man, he was good there at Navy. And now that he can fully focus on football, what does that mean? And I think that there's a lot of upside with Heidenreich, and if you cut him, I don't know if he's the kind of guy, if you can get to the practice squad, to be honest. Maybe because you tend to overrate your own kind of team's guys when it comes to who's going to get poached and stuff. But man, I mean, even Sebastian Castro got poached last year and stuff, and that's honestly not as impressive of a prospect as somebody like Eli Heidenreich in my mind. So he's somebody who could get poached, and so I think the Steelers will really try hard to keep him. So I think, Molly, it's safe to continue building the hype for him for now. Maybe don't go out and buy that jersey yet unless you're just a big Navy fan and love the story. Maybe, that's fine. But I would probably hold off on buying the jersey. I personally don't buy the jersey until players have spent a couple years on the team anyways, but to each their own. Thank you for the question. Again, call 412-254-3145 to have your question answered on a future episode. I'm Ross, that's Joe, and we will be back on Thursday starting next week.